friends, welcome back. Today I will talk about some other surface level characteristics that differentiate members of the workforce. Initially we talked about some insidious factors which are not explicit but implicit in form of discrimination and stereotype. Now when we are talking about surface level characteristics, they are very much visible, they are clear among the group members. These are the biographical characteristics. These are the personal characteristics such as age, gender, race, disability and length of tenure. We cannot deny from these facts because they are so open, explicit that everybody knows the age of their co-workers, everybody understand their racial or ethnic background and everybody understand their tenure that they have contributed to the organization. So, they are objective and easily obtained from personal data. Even disabilities which is not hidden at all. So, these characteristics are representative of surface level diversity. As a general rule, many biological differences are not as important to actual work outcomes and far more variations occur within groups sharing biographical characteristics than between them. Here it means that the biographical characteristics can identify big differences among members. So, these surface level factors are age, that is the workforce, which is the most important asset for any organization and can be an issue of increasing importance during the next decade for many reasons, and there is a very specific reason why. The problem is bimodal. Bimodal here means two-way. As I mentioned in my previous discussion that India being the youngest country will have the largest size of young workforce, right, maybe in by the year 2027, maybe in just few years, right, and that age gap will be between 15 and 64. Whereas, in United States if we compare the population, young population with that of American population, it was found that the workforce aging between 55 and older is 20% and increasing, and legislation has for all intents and purposes. That means, the old age population is increasing in USA and in India the young population is increasing. So, there is a huge gap, and in both the cases, since it is a bimodal factor, in both the factors if we talk about US, then definitely they have different laws to understand that why old age workforce is more working, because the population is not that much dense and people for all these purposes they have made the retirement mandatory for every worker. Whereas, in India the young population is much more higher than America. So, the United States and Australia among other countries have laws directed against age discrimination. However, in India retirement at an early age is necessary to make way for the youth. Now, in Western countries the population is high for old age workers. So, they make it necessary to create jobs for old age workers because the young population is very less. Whereas, in India since young population is very high, they have to make a space for Indian workforce to come into organizations, occupy those spaces and perform their job. For that, old age workers have to mandatorily take retirement. So, this is a bimodal factor. Age is a bimodal factor when we talk about biographical characteristics of surface diversity. Now, at the same time, age is something which is very much constitutes stereotype and discrimination. Why? A stereotype of older worker can be a number of times that old population is grumpy, they are inflexible and they are always changing, or they are not at all flexible with the changing times. Managers often see a number of positive qualities that older workers bring to their job, such as experience, judgment, strong work ethic and commitment. Now, this is a change in the perspective that initially old workers were considered as grumpy, inflexible, but in the present scenario to compete with the global world, even organizations tend to value old age workers because they bring with themselves lot of experience, lot of expertise and work ethics, that how to contribute more work to the organization. So, this is a stereotypical difference that has made a shift in the thought process of organizations. It also has impact on turnover, absenteeism, productivity and satisfaction. The older an employee gets, the less likely he or she is to quit their job. This is so obvious because when they become older, they have less job opportunities and they try to fix to the job only. So, there is reduced absenteeism and there is reduced turnover, rather increased commitment to their job because they have fewer job opportunities and they become more specialized with time. Their long tenure also tends to provide them with higher wage rates, longer vacations and more attractive pension benefits. In general, older employees have lower rates of avoidable absence than do younger employees. That is again a makeshift in the thought process that initially old age workers were discriminated or stereotyped and they were forced to leave the job. But in the present day, to maintain that diversity and include all the age group workforce, even they are being considered as an important aspect based on their tenure or contribution to the organization. At the same time, many believe productivity declines with age, such as speed, agility, strength or dexterity or coordination decay over time, and they also perceive their job to be bored or there is lack of intellectual stimulation that contribute to reduced productivity. However, there is again a contradictory assumption. It is being observed that employees significantly become more productive in terms of sales generated because of labor cost. They continue to take up their jobs at lower cost or lower wages, and other reviews of the research find that age and job task performance are unrelated and that older workforce are more likely to engage in citizenship behaviors. Since there is no job opportunity for them, they continue with the job and they tend to indulge or engage in discretionary or citizenship behaviors. That is, they tend to cooperate more, support more to the organizational activities. Now, again the point is that, and I am repeating again and again, that there is a makeshift in the thought process that what was a perception for old age workers and now it has been shifted to a positive thought process that how old age workers can also contribute to the success of the organization, and that is diversity. Now, another concern is that there is a positive correlation between age and job satisfaction. It has been found that older workers are more satisfied with their work, they have better relationships with their co-workers and they are committed to their job. This satisfaction tends to continuously increase among professionals as they age and highlight the value of older workers in the workforce. There is more integrity, there are more work ethics that exist among old age workers and they tend to contribute more to the organization. Thus, the effects of discrimination against individuals on the basis of age were also studied, and it was found that organizational climate favoring age discrimination was associated with lower levels of commitment to the company. Again, companies where policy says that old age workers will be discriminated at one particular time, they also tend to lose interest in their job because they know that sooner or later they will be excluded from the job or they will be fired from their job, and they tend to become less committed to their job because there is a point when they will not continue. This leads to reduced commitment or attachment to the job. In turn, related to lower levels of organizational performance, such results suggest that combating age discrimination may be associated with higher levels of organizational performances, which is but obvious. United States and Australia are among such other countries that have laws directed against age discrimination, and the fact is that these countries have to implement policies which are against age discrimination because these countries have larger percentage of old age population. Like India, we have young population, they have the companies have to make way for young population to come forward and contribute to the organization, and old age workers have to take retirement. But in countries like US, Australia, they have to implement these policies because young population is very less and old age population is high, and they need those workers as an asset to the organization. The other is gender. This is again a biographical characteristics. There are no consistent male female differences in problem solving ability, analytical skills, competitive drive, motivation, sociability or learning drive. That is but obvious. There is no difference in the mental abilities of any male or female, but still it is being considered the men to be more competent than females and have fewer professional, and that is why females have less professional opportunities for career growth. Studies have found that women are more agreeable and willing to conform to authority, whereas men are more aggressive and more likely to have expectations of success, but those differences are minor. Since females understand this discrimination, they tend to conform to the rules very easily because they do not want to lose their job. Rather, men have more space to go against the company policies and become more aggressive. So, it is just an idea that is being posited in organizations, but the other picture says that the difference does not exist at all. Given the significantly increased female participation in the workforce over the last 40 years, it has been understood that male and female roles can be assumed that there is no significant difference in job productivity between men and women. That is a fact. When we already understand that there is no difference in the mental ability of male and female, then in the last 40 years, companies have also grown out of this fact that even when they are performing at the same level, there is no difference in the performance. They are equally good at every level. Now, further when I am going slide by slide, these are the assumptions that I am talking about, that how gender has been posited as a diverse biographical characteristics. Findings have also stated that employees revealed significant differences, with women more likely to turn over with men. Why? Because there is a higher rate of absenteeism than men, because the possible explanation is cultural and historical norms of placing home and family responsibilities on women. It has been expected from different societies across the world that women have to take care of the houses, they have to take care of their kids, and they have to be there at home. So, this is being assumed that such responsibilities, when exist on any female employee, they tend to be absent from their work, and there is higher rate of turnover because there is more burden on females. This is another assumption. This is a kind of discrimination that is being posited against women. However, the role of women has definitely changed over time, even generations, and men have come forward to contribute to the household responsibilities along with females. One interesting finding is that regardless of sex, parents were rated lower in job commitments, achievement driving and dependability than individuals without children, but mothers were rated especially low in competence. This is again a general idea that is being posited by the society. Another concern is that the difference between men and women is, especially when the employee has preschool age children, the preference for work schedule is very different. Working mothers are more likely to prefer part-time work, flexible work schedules and telecommuting in order to accommodate their family responsibilities, and women also prefer jobs that encourage work-life balance, which has the effect of limiting their options for career advancement. Now, discrimination is also there based on gender, and at the same time women also have their voice that what kind of job they can perform. So, this is a shift in the thought process, there is a change in the thought process that even working mothers have the desire to work, have a career advancement, but in terms of different policies that can be implemented where flexibility is there and work life balance is there. So, that generates more confidence among women. In the hiring realm, there is also gender bias when selecting candidates for certain positions. It is reported that men and women may be offered a similar number of developmental experiences, that men and women will undergo different kind of training procedures. They will go different kind of change practices and programs or modification programs, but when it comes to appointment of any woman at higher position, then there comes discrimination and there is a class ceiling effect that women are being restricted to cross a particular line for their career growth. So, these are the situations where female employees experience discrimination and how they tend to overcome. Even if they tend to capture those higher positions, they are being considered as aggressive, and that again adds more stigma to their perception of being a successful or accommodating women. So, we can continue that women who succeed in traditionally male domains are perceived as less likable, more hostile and less desirable as supervisors, although women at the top have been reporting that this perception can be countered by effective interpersonal skills. When people tend to interact with women at higher positions with continuous interaction process, they tend to understand that women have better interpersonal skills to handle any position. It is not about proving oneself, it is about a change where diversity in terms of gender should be accommodated based on equal opportunities for male and females. But at the same time, gender discrimination has a pervasive negative impact. Women still earn less money than men for the same positions, even in traditionally female roles. Gender differences in promotions, bonuses and salaries are 14 times larger than the differences in performance evaluations. Working mothers also face maternal wall bias. Maternal wall bias meaning that they are often not considered for new positions after they have children, and both men and women experience discrimination for the family caregiving roles. That means even men are also being discriminated, that once they have their families, then organization have this perception that both parents have some caregiving responsibilities for the child and they cannot contribute much more to the higher designations. Women who receive fewer challenging assignments and development opportunities from biased managers tend to curtail their management aspirations. When such kind of discrimination do exist and women experience at workplaces, they also curtail with their aspiration. Maybe they join any organization with high aspiration to take up higher positions with their experiences, but in long run when they experience discrimination, they tend to cut down on their aspirations. Women who are assertive in the workplace tend to be liked less and perceived as less desirable, rather more hostile and aggressive. So, these are the negative impactor or influences of discrimination about women. Although time has changed and how organizations have accepted the competency of female employees at par or equal to male employees. Countries like Australia, United States and United Kingdom have laws against gender discrimination, and countries such as Belgium, France, Norway and Spain are seeking gender diversity through laws to increase percentage of women on boards of directors or even higher political positions. Now, these countries have female president, they are holding presidential positions and represent countries at global level. So, this is a makeshift in terms of diversity, equity and inclusion. Race and ethnicity. This is again so controversial term and issue in society and organizations, and even if they are discriminated, then there are repercussions that are faced by organizations and societies, because different races and ethnicity give identity to every person and they have a desire to carry that identity with themselves, and that becomes their right at the same point. So, race is the heritage people use to identify themselves, that carry that pride that they belong to a particular race, and there is that race is in their DNA. So, they cannot detach themselves from their race as a heritage, whereas when it comes to ethnicity, it is a culture or cultural norms or characteristics that is additional to the race, and people actually tend to merge their race and ethnicity in a way that gives them a new identity in different parts of the world. Typically, we associate race with biology and ethnicity with culture, but there is a history of self-identifying for both classifications. So, race and ethnicity have been studied as they relate to employment outcomes such as hiring decisions, performance evaluations, pay and workplace discrimination. So, again this leads to sometimes workplace ostracism. People from different race and ethnicity, they are being ostracized, they are being socially excluded from the workplaces, they are not accepted, they are not welcomed and they experience discrimination. Individuals may slightly favor colleagues of their own race in performing evaluations or promotion decisions. They will experience rise in pay, hike in pay, and although such differences are not found consistently, especially when highly structured methods of decision making are employed. The more the organization is structured, the more the organization has stronger ethical policies, their discrimination is diminished. More the structure is weak, more such race and ethicalities will get favor in form of decision making. At the same time, members of racial and ethnic minorities report higher levels of discrimination in the workplace. For instance, African Americans generally have worse than white in employment decisions. They receive lower ratings, they have lower performance evaluations and job performance ratings, less pay and fewer promotions. But maybe this is experienced when the organization is not well structured based on policies and procedures. The more the organizations are structured, the more the discrimination is diminished. Thus, representation of all racial groups in organizations remains a goal. An individual of minority status is much likely to leave the organization if there is a feeling of inclusiveness. The more discrimination or typical attitude is reduced, the more there is sense of inclusiveness, which leads to positive diversity climate. This can lead to increased commitment, retention, suggesting there are organizational performance gains associated with reducing racial and ethnic discrimination. All right. The fourth surface level diversity is disability. Disability in form of physical disability or mental disability, or it can be about mental illness. But yes, people do have some disabilities, and people suffering from this disability has to be identified at workplaces. There are specific laws, policies that person with any kind of suffering or disability from not less than 40% of any disability has to be certified by medical authority, and that constitutes to be welcomed by any organization irrespective of his talents. Examples include blindness, low vision or partial vision, leprosy cured, hearing impairment, locomotor disability, mental retardation and mental illness. All these kind of disabilities have to be declared by an individual through the medical authority to any organization. Especially in India, the broad definition of different categories of disabilities have been included in the Person with Disabilities Act of 1995. Therefore, we can say that disabilities can be hidden, such as sensory disabilities, cognitive or learning impairments or sleep disorders, which are hidden, which are not explicit, but yes, it is expected that any employee should declare these kind of disabilities. The impact of disabilities on employment outcomes has been explored from a variety of perspectives. First, when disability status is randomly manipulated among hypothetical candidates, disabled individuals are rated as having superior personal qualities like dependability. It is a way to create space for a disabled person that he should be selected because he is a dependable person. We try to bring more positive traits to an individual's personality. Another review suggests that workers with disabilities receive higher performance evaluations. However, individuals with disabilities tend to encounter lower performance expectations and are less likely to be hired. It is both the ways. This thought is two ways, that workers with disabilities will get higher evaluation for their performances. Although when they are being hiring or when they are undergoing the hiring process, it is assumed that he or she will not be able to perform well and maybe he or she should not be hired. But if she or she is hired, then they receive higher evaluations. At the same time, mental disabilities may impair performance more than physical disabilities. Individuals with common mental health issues such as depression or anxiety are significantly more likely to be absent for work. Now, the point is, if these kind of mental disabilities are not declared by the employee itself, then it creates a sort of disparity within the working structure of the organization, because it will lead a person suffering from depression or anxiety being absent from work. So, there is disintegration in the organizational process. So, it is expected that any person with any kind of mental or physical disability should be declared or very much well accounted in the records of the organization. At the same time, technology and workplace advancements must be increased, and so that the scope is available for jobs with different disabilities, so that the selection procedure, the technology, the mechanical advancement should take place, so that there is enough scope and space for people with physical and mental disability to perform the task. Due to negative employer bias, many who suffer from mental illness are reluctant to disclose their status, which compounds the problem. As I mentioned just now, that they are absent from the workplaces with a fear that what if they declare their disability and how the employer will react to it. However, continuing technology advancements have greatly increased the scope of available jobs for those with disabilities, providing new and diverse opportunities. It is based on use of technology in hiring selection procedures, because special arrangements and amendments have been made by the organizations to create job space for people with disabilities. The other is sexual orientation and gender diversity. Sexual orientation here means what you perceive, what an individual perceive about his own orientation. With much has changed, the full acceptance and accommodation of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and questioning LGBTQ as a community employee remains a work in progress. That means still lot of acceptance is required for people who are belonging to this community, that is LGBTQ. In India and many other countries like United States, United Kingdom and Australia, this law prohibits discrimination against employees based on sexual orientation. That means countries especially like India, they welcome people or employees who are belonging to such type of communities with different sexual orientations. However, recently another broad term has evolved in terms of acronym, that is quilt bag, and describes individuals with more different sexual orientation, that is queer or questioning, undecided, intersex, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, asexual or gay. This is another acronym that has evolved beyond LGBTQ. More people are coming up with different sexual orientations, which is again a natural phenomena, that how their body reacts or works in different form in defining their sexual orientation. So, survey indicates that more than 90% of Fortune 500 companies have policies that cover sexual orientation. As for gender identity, companies are increasingly adopting policies to govern the way their organizations treat transgender employees, because their mental ability can be at par, that can contribute to the organization or can prove to be an asset. For instance, IBM ensures that people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual or transgender feel safe in their company, and they may contribute directly to our bottom line and ensure the success of their business. So, this is the most welcoming decision of IBM as a company, which we can exemplify that how gender diversity has been implemented in organizations, that how they are giving identity to these kind of people or employees with different sexual orientations. As for gender identity, companies are increasingly putting in place policies to govern how their organization treat employees who change genders, often called transgender employees, and dealing with transgender employees requires special considerations such as bathrooms, employee names and so on. So, special arrangements are being made. Again, this is a change in the century, that how organizations have become so open to the society first of all, that they are welcoming people with different backgrounds based on culture, based on their biological characteristics and based on their identity or sexual orientation. We can easily understand that so far how organizations have moved earlier, where they inhibited, they closed the gates for people with different backgrounds, and how they have a closed mindset. But they have opened up now, because their agenda is how to compete globally and how globalization can be considered not only from the business point of view, but from the societal point of view, that every individual has its own identity and must be respected with what one person has. Some other characteristics describing workplace diversity are cultural identity. These organizations need to accommodate and respect individual cultural identities, and organizations provide flexible work hours to accommodate religious practices, celebrating diverse cultural holidays or offering language training for non-native speakers. There are organizations, if you go to South Korea, their organizations offer some language training programs to learn Korean language and accommodate with their cultures, or vice versa. intellectual and physical abilities. Intellectual ability is the capacity to do mental activities like thinking, reasoning and problem solving, while physical ability is the capacity to do tasks that demand stamina, dexterity, that is muscular capacity, strength and similar characteristics. So, this connotes that just because we all are not equal in abilities does not imply that some individuals are inherently inferior. That means diversity carries more strength rather being narrow minded. So, everyone has strength and weaknesses and that make an individual relatively superior or inferior to others in performing certain tasks and activities. These are the dimensions of intellectual and physical abilities in terms of number attitude, verbal comprehension, perceptual speed, inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, spatial visualization, memory. These are some of the dimensions of intellectual ability that any employee can be measured on. Whereas there are some physical abilities as well, for example, strength factors where we talk about dynamic strength, trunk strength, static or explosive strength, flexible factors that is extend flexibility or dynamic flexibility and other factors that body coordination, balance and stamina. Now, these are the certain factors that any individual can score well on one aspect or ability and another individual can score well on another type of ability, but in all they are superior to each other, and how organizations are tapping on each ability of an individual while calling them as more capable than others. This is the notion of diversity which follows equity and inclusiveness. Therefore, we can say that of course, integrating diverse skills and abilities into an optimally productive workforce takes skill, but can help organizations to achieve excellent performances. So, that is all with our discussion about diversity in organizations. I hope we can be well acquainted with such an important discussion about diversity in organizations and is very much applicable in the area of organizational behavior, because only OBM professionals can act upon these issues where HR plays a major role and how HR can be easily linked with diversity, equity and inclusiveness. Thank you so much.